Day 12 of the war with Iran. Devastating waves of IDF airstrikes into Iran are ongoing. The IDF says it has degraded or destroyed many of the key assets of Iran's besieged militia in one of the country's western provinces, dealing another blow to the regime's internal security apparatus used to enforce, control, and suppress dissent. At the same time, the Air Force is striking launchers that target Israel. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz has the latest.
Targets included the main internal security headquarters, a central intelligence command center, IRGC facilities responsible for cracking down on protests, and several besieged command posts. Officials say the strikes are part of a broader effort to weaken the core power structures of the Iranian regime. Earlier, the IDF eliminated a launch squad minutes before they could fire drones from western Iran toward Israel. The Air Force spotted the soldiers at a western Iran launch site and struck them as they entered, halting the attack. The IDF says operations will continue to destroy infrastructure and neutralize drone and missile threats to protect Israel. Meanwhile, new satellite images show extensive damage at Iranian ballistic missile production sites following Israeli airstrikes last week. One image taken by the defense intelligence firm Vantar shows multiple buildings destroyed or badly damaged at Iran's Parchin military complex south of Tehran. The IDF said it struck Parchin on Thursday, targeting factories for the production of explosives for ballistic missile warheads and a facility for mixing and casting missile engines, as well as a complex used for research, development, assembly, and production of advanced cruise missiles. Now on day 12, as long as the last major conflict with Iran, the IDF says it will keep targeting any launchers and military sites aimed at Israel, sending a clear message that the campaign will continue until the U.S. and Israel decide that the threats are neutralized.
And Israel has launched a new wave of airstrikes in southern Beirut as the IDF continues to target Hezbollah. Over the last day, Hezbollah expanded its range, including launches directed toward the Tel Aviv area. Lebanon's president has denounced Hezbollah and called for direct talks with Israel to secure a ceasefire. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
Israeli forces struck multiple targets in the southern suburbs of Beirut known as Dahiya, a well-known Hezbollah stronghold. The military says the airstrikes hit terror infrastructure, including financial facilities, weapon stockpiles, and propaganda material. On the ground, Israeli troops from several divisions continue operations in southern Lebanon to disrupt Hezbollah's military networks. A Hezbollah cell was identified and eliminated in a targeted airstrike, and additional suspects approaching IDF troops were also struck from the air. Troops from the 36th Division also carried out raids, killing militants near Israeli forces. In a precise nighttime strike, the IDF confirmed the killing of a Hezbollah regional commander from the group's Nasser unit. Since the start of Operation Roaring Lion, the military says more than 70 Hezbollah missile launchers have been destroyed, many just minutes before they could be fired toward Israel. Amid the fighting, Lebanon's president Joseph Aoun has called for direct talks with Israel under international supervision, aimed at securing a ceasefire and preventing a wider war. He accused Hezbollah of dragging Lebanon toward disaster, warning the country could become a second Gaza if the fighting continues. Any plan proposed by Aoun would include a ceasefire, deployment of the Lebanese army near the Israeli border, and measures to curb Hezbollah's military activity. If Israel agrees to talks, it would be a significant shift, given the countries remain technically at war and have historically relied on US or UN mediation. Israel has yet to indicate how it will respond to the Lebanese call for talks. For now, Israel and Hezbollah are each causing the other as much damage as they are able. By all accounts, Israel is winning.
Last night and again this afternoon, northern and central Israel came under missile barrages from Iran. New figures are now emerging about the scale of the attacks. According to reports, Iran has launched a total of around 300 missiles at Israel since the start of the war. Joining us now with more is our correspondent India Naftali, who is at the Magen David Adom Command Center in central Israel. India, what can you tell us about the latest attacks?
Oh, last night, Israel had a restless night with a barrage of missiles coming from Iran towards northern and central Israel. However, I can report that there were no direct hits and there were no injuries reported from that missile barrage. However, there were some injuries reported from people rushing to shelters, which is actually quite a problem in the country because not everyone has bomb shelters. Only homes built after 1991 were under this regulation to have shelters. So it is a problem during this war. Now, after last night's barrage, there was a 9-hour lull where there were no attacks, no rockets, no missiles. And then again, about 2 hours ago, another barrage came. The IDF hasn't released details about that barrage. That's something they usually do not do for security reasons. They do not release too much information about barrages when they do happen. Now, Lidar, we do know, like you said, that 300 missiles have been launched towards Israel since the start of the war. About half of those actually are cluster bomb missiles, which are particularly problematic. For one, they're extremely difficult to intercept, but there's actually another reason why they're so problematic. Many of those bomblets, those sub-munitions that are released from the bomb, they don't explode and they can land on streets and cities. And unfortunately, if they're not cleaned up, someone could pick it up or a car could run over it and cause an explosion. So that's why they have to release bomb squads to clean up these bomblets after they've been released.
And India, I do want to ask... Yeah, I do want to ask a little bit about the future of these barrages. I mean, because we're seeing some patterns emerge. Are the attacks starting to slow down?
So what the IDF has noticed is that Iran seems to be struggling to launch coordinated large barrages. We're seeing now smaller numbers of missiles per barrage, but as of now, we're not sure how many missiles Iran has in its arsenal right now. We know at the beginning of the war, they had about 2,500 missiles. They've launched 300 to Israel, and the IDF has said that they've either disabled or destroyed 300 more of those.
So still a lot of work to be done in Iran. India, Naftali, thank you so much for joining us and for the updates. And a cargo vessel was hit by an unknown projectile in the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Earlier, the United States destroyed Iranian mine-laying vessels near the strait as the U.S. struggles to keep the vital waterway open. ILTV's Kalev Ben-David has the latest developments.
As Iran continues its naval attacks in the Gulf, a cargo ship was struck near the Strait of Hormuz, north of Oman. The strike caused a fire on board. Authorities secured the area and removed the crew. This was the second reported attack on a cargo ship in the strait within hours. Officials have not confirmed who fired the projectile, but the attack came amid Iranian threats to keep the waterway closed as a war tactic to raise economic pressures on the region. Earlier, U.S. Central Command released video it says shows strikes on Iranian boats used to lay naval mines. According to the Pentagon, 16 such vessels were eliminated in operations near the strategic waterway. President Trump warned that if Iran has placed any mines in the strait, they must be removed immediately or Tehran will face military consequences.
The president and his energy team are closely watching the markets, speaking with industry leaders, and the U.S. military is drawing up additional options following the president's directive to continue keeping the Strait of Hormuz open.
The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most important energy routes, with about a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas shipments passing through the narrow channel between Iran and Oman. Since the start of the war, shipping through the strait has been severely disrupted. The vital oil transit route has been all but shut since vessels in the area were hit by Iranian strikes following U.S. and Israeli attacks on the Islamic Republic. The closure has been driving oil prices sharply higher and is putting new pressure on the world economy. Iranian Security Chief Ali Larijani warned in a post on X, the Strait of Hormuz will either be a strait of peace and prosperity for all or a strait of defeat and suffering for warmongers.
And joining us now with the latest on the war with Iran is Michael Pregent, senior Middle East analyst, former U.S. military intelligence officer, and former advisor to CENTCOM commanders. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good morning from D.C.
So we're nearly 2 weeks into this war, and the United States and Israel have hit numerous targets, numerous senior Iranian officials. U.S. President Donald Trump has said, on the one hand, that the U.S. operation is far ahead of schedule, and he foresees an end to the war very soon. But on the other hand, here in Israel, the assessment is that there's much more work still to be done. I mean, do you share President Trump's assessment? What do you make of this dissonance?
I think what the president is trying to say that we are hitting our military objectives, the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, the drone factories. We are succeeding from a military standpoint, but we're trying to create a window, an opportunity for the Iranian people to take back their government. And if the people don't move against the regime, at least show some sort of signs that they're going to do that, then the president can basically say that we've accomplished our military mission to degrade Iran's capabilities, to threaten its neighbors, to build a nuclear weapon, to export terrorism, and to fund terrorism, and call it a successful, limited military campaign. Regime change has to have the face of the Iranian people on it. It can't be something we force them into.
Now, the Strait of Hormuz is a key strategic shipping strait. There's now an ongoing battle for controlling this as the Iranians are threatening essentially all the ships passing by. I mean, what can you tell us about this, and how will it affect sort of the continuing operations in the war moving forward?
Well, that's a new phase of this operation. So you're getting away from going after military targets on the ground in Iran and now having to defend international commerce shipping lane. And it's very difficult to do, but we can do it. The U.S. Navy can do it. We have those capabilities. The one thing that everybody's worried about are mines. But see, these mines can't be set to target a specific ship. They're indiscriminate. So if they go out there, that would put Chinese tankers at risk. It would put Russian tankers at risk. So there's a calculation that the regime has to make. Do we just send these mines out there where they can just blow up anything? Or do we threaten to do it and see what kind of concessions we can get? So that's what I think we're seeing right now. The Shahed drones cannot sink oil tankers. So if an oil tanker is actually struck and it sinks, it's going to be a different type of munition. A anti-ship missile maybe, or something with a higher payload. But the Shahed 136 drones cannot sink big ships.
And you mentioned as well earlier about regime change. Now, both the United States and Israel have sent mixed signals about regime change as sort of an aim of this war. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu directly addressed the Iranian people, saying soon their time will come to sort of rise up, topple this regime. But from a strategic or, a military aspect, I mean, how likely is it that this war will in fact succeed in bringing down the regime, or really succeed in setting the stage for the Iranian people to rise up?
Well, we've decimated leadership, right? We've basically hit leaders going down to maybe the seventh, level of capable leaders. So that's the IRGC. And when it comes to the Assembly of Experts or the Guardian Council, we've decimated that, and we don't know whether Khomeini's son is alive. We know he's been severely injured. But this is the perfect candidate for the IRGC. They want somebody like him because he basically deferred to them on everything. And if he's laid up in a bed and can't actually communicate and doesn't know what's going on, that's the perfect supreme leader for the IRGC to continue these missions. Earlier in your report, you said a besieged headquarters was hit in the West. That's huge. It's the besieged that puts down the population when it rises up or when it protests. Besieged targets need to be center for any campaign, whether it's Israeli Air Force or U.S. Air Force. We see videos of besieged members saying there's nobody showing up. The regime is not in charge anymore, and I'm going to go home, meaning I'm a besieged member and I'm going to go home. So you're looking for things like that. We have to see signs on the ground in order to provide momentum, but we can't create that momentum. It needs to be, we degrade the regime, if you think it's weak enough, do something about it. And that's what I think everyone's looking for, the Iranian people to do something about it.
Now, we see that Israel is mainly focusing on the missile capabilities, which, of course, directly threaten the country, all the Middle Eastern countries, and, of course, the internal security apparatus. But I do want to ask about the nuclear program. What is the status of that today and of the enriched uranium that is supposedly, held or trapped underground?
Right. So that's one of the key things. When I was a former intelligence officer, when I came out of the intelligence community, I started working on the Iran deal portfolio, and I looked at the nuclear program and I looked at Annex B, which basically was all the concessions that the Obama administration was willing to give to Tehran. But one of the things I noticed was, disclosed sites and undisclosed sites. So if you say that the JCPOA only covered, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action only covered disclosed sites, that automatically means there are undisclosed sites. So that's what's being targeted by the IDF, by the Americans. We basically set their nuclear program back probably a decade, right? But it doesn't mean they can't reconstitute it faster if we don't pay attention to it, meaning they will prioritize putting air defense assets where these nuclear sites are, rebuilding them, and when we see those indicators, we have to hit them, we have to strike them. But the one good thing is Iran's now learning that Russian and Chinese air defense systems are no match for the U.S. Air Force or the Israeli Air Force, and that is something that I've heard in the Middle East. We buy 3 air defense systems so that we can make one work. We cannibalize the other 2 to make one work. That's how bad these systems are. And I think Iran knows it better than any country at this point.
Absolutely. Well, still more work to be done, of course. Michael Pregin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Meanwhile, Gaza has been relatively quiet since the start of the war with Iran. Earlier today, the IDF struck a rocket launch site in the Sabah area of northern Gaza. The site used by Hamas to fire rockets towards Israel was targeted because it violated the current ceasefire agreement. This comes against the backdrop of a fragile ceasefire in Gaza. Israel says it will respond to any attempts to resume hostilities. This after Hamas made several recent attempts to fire rockets from the Strip, which the IDF says constitute a breach of the truce. The IDF says forces under Southern Command remain deployed in the area and will continue operations to prevent rearmament by terrorist groups, neutralize threats, and protect the State of Israel and its citizens from any further attacks from Gaza or elsewhere. And the government is preparing a major expansion of the national budget to finance the war effort. According to reports, the cabinet plans to increase spending by about 40 billion shekels, around $13 billion, mostly for defense operations and other wartime needs. Defense spending is expected to jump sharply, driven by the cost of airstrikes, reservist mobilization, and missile defense. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich says the war has already cost Israel about 9 billion shekels, and the fiscal deficit is expected to grow. The finance ministry also estimates the economic shutdown during the conflict has been costing the economy about 9.5 billion shekels per week. The war is also reshaping political priorities with controversial legislation, including parts of the Haredi draft exemption law reportedly put on hold, as the government focuses on passing a wartime budget.
לכן בכלל לא הייתה שאלה. היינו חייבים לצאת למערכה הזאת, ואנחנו פועלים ביתר שאת עם החיילים והטייסים הגיבורים שלנו. אבל, יש כאן אבל אחד גדול, זה עולה כסף, הרבה כסף. ולכן אנחנו נדרשים לתת תקציב מיוחד במהלך המלחמה עם עשרות מיליארדי שקלים, כדי לעזור לתקציב הביטחון למאמץ המלחמתי.
And as Israelis continue living with missile sirens during the ongoing war with Iran, many children are still coping with the trauma of October 7th and years of terror attacks. For more than 2 decades, the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund has been providing specialized therapy and support to help young victims heal. Joining us now is Chava Kleiman, Vice President of the organization, to share a little bit more. Chava, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So first of us, can you tell us how the Children's Fund was established? I mean, what led to the creation of this organization?
Sure. So about over 2 decades ago, the founder and president, David Rubin, was driving from Jerusalem to his home in Shiloh and was ambushed by terrorists on the road. and he and his 3-year-old son were shot. He was shot in the leg, and his 3-year-old son was shot in the head. And miraculously, they survived the attack, and they're okay today. But the trauma that he saw on his son and the other children around him made him decide that we needed to do something to help the children in Israel.
And, since the October 7th attacks, and now, of course, with the ongoing war with Iran and the missile sirens and, sounding really throughout the day and throughout the night, how has the level of trauma amongst Israeli children, how has that changed?
So we've seen an incredible increase in trauma amongst children all over Israel, because this is not something that's only affecting children in a certain place, but all over the country. And we see children that don't even have time to try to heal from the trauma, because what's happening now is that it's continuous trauma. And one of the things that we know about trauma is that, we try to heal trauma when there's a break in trauma, but that's not happening. So it's a completely different scene that we're seeing in children all over the country.
And can you maybe talk about some of the main projects or the therapeutic treatments that the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund provides, sort of to help children cope with these, trauma, with these changes, and help sort of rebuild their sense of safety?
So because we're working with children, we need to work in very creative ways, right? You can't just sit down with a child and say, what's wrong? So we work with a number of trained therapists in very different creative therapies: music, drama, arts, small animal therapy, horseback riding therapy. So we do a lot of that kind of work. We also do group work with children in schools or in different centers or after school activities. We try to get to whoever we can, and especially now we have mobile therapy teams that are going out to people who can't make it to centers, whether it's evacuated families in the hotels or people who just can't leave their homes for whatever reason. So we work in those kind of ways, and also a lot of resilience programming, because also that's very important at this time.
And can you tell us a little bit about the resilience programming?
Sure. So, something I always like to say is that yes, Israelis are resilient and children are resilient, but if we don't give them the tools to help them and the support that they need, they're human beings in the end. So we do a lot of, like I said, group work or individual therapy, but also family therapy, and also support for parents, because when you're working with children, you also need to help their parents.
Absolutely. And you spent many years working in other community roles before joining the organization. What led you to personally take on this mission?
I think over years of really working with families and children and dealing with trauma, I realized that if we don't help the future generation in not only emergency crisis healing, but long-term healing, resilience care, what is the future of our generation going to look like? What are our children going to look like? And that really just made me want to get involved and keep doing the important work that we're doing.
Well, it really is crucial and important work, especially during these times. Chava Kleinman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And so to help our children overcome the trauma of war, you can scan the QR code on your screens or visit israelchildren.org now. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 10 degrees Celsius or 51 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside steady temperatures with highs of 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. That's at ILTV_Israel on all platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladarga Velazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.